right, great.
All right, so I'm Susan, and today we're going to tell you a story in 3 acts. Act 1 is about defeat and failure. Act 2 is about leaning into those challenges and really understanding why you had the failure. Act 3 is completely reimagining, coming up with a creative solution to be able to succeed through that challenge. I'm not talking about Moneyball. I'm not talking about the Oakland A's, and I'm definitely not Brad Pitt. But we wanted to talk to you about that today because Tomomi and I both think that OT security has had a massive empathy challenge with operations. And it was awesome today to listen to Megan, to listen to Blake that pointed that out. But we'd like to talk to you about some of the structural challenges we've seen and how we could get more out of our colleagues in operations and better alignment. So we're going to spend that time today talking you through this story. We'll talk about what we've seen in the field as challenges. We'll talk to you about some of the structural issues. And then with the magic of Disney, we're going to ask you all to close your eyes, imagine you're in a nice fluffy cloud, and envision that we are in Horizon 1 for lights out factories. And we'll use that frame as a means to think about how we could minimize the cognitive load and the context switching on our colleagues in operations.
So Susan and I started this conversation, I think it was in December, January this year. And, you do the normal girly stuff, you get together and talk about OT security, right? That's the typical, typical our get together. And we started having a conversation of, okay, we hear a lot about lights at factory and, highly automated operations. Those are the concepts that sold to our colleagues in the VP of Engineering and the VP of Operations. And those are the kind of business that's motivating the business today. And say that those words are coming to us. But then, of course, we want to answer to those new technical advancement not with no, but yes and. Then what will be the role that we need to take? How would it impact OT security in terms of technology, but process and also the organization? How we operate would change in those highly automated world. But then when we started talking about this future concepts and how that impacts us, and then we come back to the discussion of, okay, but are we on the right trajectory? What are the challenges that we have today to actually achieve and connect these dots from today to that tomorrow? And one of the structure program that we discussed a lot was about the budget. So I think it was the Spider-Man movie that has the quote of great power comes with the great responsibility, right? And in OT security's case, it's not like that. Great mandate comes with a very tiny limited budget. That's a kind of an issue that we have today. And there's a lot of data pointing out that, how OT security budget is not growing as we hoped as in this industry. And there's also data supporting that. This is a data coming from the Science Institute survey in OT security and how the budgeting is done across the past 3 years. And this was done in 2023. And looking at the very left of the chart, where no budget has been assigned to OT, there's a kind of spiking increase compared to last year. Well, if you compare to the 2 years ago, it seems like you're going back to the no again, but it means that there's a little bit of inconsistency, and somehow OT security budget is not always in the same trajectory on the right side up, but it's more about somehow it has certain dependency to something. And then the question that we should be thinking about is not really about do we have enough budget, but it's about, okay, going back to some of the talk we heard today, cybersecurity is existing in the context of business. And then the things that we need to be asking is OT security budget proportional to support all the digital initiative that our colleagues in operation and engineering and maintenance are trying to achieve? And then the challenge is that OT security budget is, well, it seems like a very small portion, yes, but also it's very fragmented. how OT security budget is usually calculated in terms of defining the size of the bubble, it's coming from like the certain percentage of cybersecurity budget. Assuming OT security budget is all sitting in the cybersecurity budget. And cybersecurity budget usually is a proportion of the technology budget. And technology budget is usually a proportion of the revenue, total revenue of the business. But it works in IT security. But in OT security, who holds the budget, who holds the governance mandate is not necessarily matching with who's implementing the solution and who's maintaining the initiatives and solutions. Sometimes CISOs and cybersecurity team has a mandate and have the can pull the initial trigger to create the OT security initiative and start running and started implementing the solution. But who's managing those solutions throughout the life cycle? Who's actually touching the system? That doesn't necessarily be the cybersecurity team. That can come down to the operations team and maintenance team. And maybe they're doing that in the discretion of operations budget, maintenance budget. So when we say OT security budget, it's not necessarily under the cybersecurity budget. Sometimes it's fragmented through different organizations, different capability. Maybe some of the initiatives is also under the GRC program. Maybe some of them is under quality management program. So by nature, it's also fragmented. And I want to ask about Susan, because Susan also worked in the past as a CISO and also had a role of implementing OT security initiatives. And do you have some confessions that you can make to these great folks in this room and also thousands of people that are apparently online? Oof, it's a very safe space.
Well, two things I want to share. I saw this meme and it kind of reflected some components of my experience. First, in the past, in security solutions, having OT security solutions, I don't think that I nailed it in the context of providing solutions that were easy for the operations teams to maintain. The UI, the UX, what they understood, their language, these tools were delivered for security folks. So that's one major kind of sin that I would like to repent. But the other one is more recently as a CISO. And it's funny because security folks and operations folks, we're very mission driven, right? How many folks here have been tied to an operations team? Show of hands, all right? And how many folks here are engaged very early in design around ICS systems? Okay, it's gonna be a good ride. So I was very, very focused in that leadership role in being able to justify my budget, to be able to say, hey, we're making really, really good investment decisions. We're being great stewards of your assets. So I spent a whole lot of time on metrics, right? To be able to demonstrate that to leadership, to maintain that budget. The result on the operations team was they were getting these metrics when they didn't have the maintenance tasks tied to patching, updates, et cetera, in their shift lists. They didn't have it in their G's and O's, right? And they certainly didn't have the time allocated to do these tasks. It was sort of bucketed into that and other tasks as needed part of the job description. And so when I handed over the OT security metrics and, would say, this is how your fleet, your team is doing, it was just one more tidal wave in the sea of what they're experiencing to keep their head above water. And I failed. So, it can be pretty easy to feel frustrated in the security role because you can think, well, I just need them to do the maintenance. I just need them to do the updates. Well, leaning into kind of this challenge, right? In manufacturing, it's 20 to 30 hours a week per facility. And a lot of that time is spent on updates when it's being done. In the energy sector, right? It could be 1,000 hours per month per fleet. That's intense. They're spending a lot of time on things like vulnerability assessments. Manufacturing is on updates. In the chemical industry, which is heavily regulated, they're spending between 15 to 25 hours per week. A lot of it is tied to regulatory compliance. Most of these tasks, when we're at the site, are not part of somebody's day job. Very few sites have a full-time person dedicated to this. Y'all know this because that is often the career trajectory of how you got into OT security, right? You got more and more into it by doing those tasks. But it's actually a lot to ask, is what I've realized. So we're leaning into the suck here, right? We know we're not in a good spot. So now we're going to dive into what are those structural challenges that we've got. If we can understand those, we can imagine a better world, right? So admittedly, I probably spent, a tenth of the time with operations, understanding their needs, treating them like an internal customer, right? Security as a service internally, than I did to leadership. And a lot of that was about budget, protecting my team, but I would have gotten way better returns on that time with the operations team because that scales, right? And, I didn't have things like a common understanding that everybody sat at the same table around good enough security. Roles and responsibilities weren't defined. There were assumptions, or we're going to manage that by policy. Anybody heard that? Shared tools and resources, configuration management databases, right? So much can be shared between those teams, but there's a ton of siloing to share the information, to share the budgets and the tools. And the part that really kind of breaks my heart is around integrated planning. So if I had, done more around operations, I could have had a seat at the table and said, you know what, let's not pay $5,000 per ICS around this firewall, around this system. Let's go ahead and work with, the vendor and accelerate the upgrade. Y'all get these features, I get this. It'll be easier for everybody. I didn't push to have a seat at the table. I didn't show value. Those were all missed opportunities. All right, so why is that the case, right? There are some things, despite everyone having a mission-oriented focus, that are differences between the teams. The CISO is like, for the love of God, tell me when the end of life is on this software that I have across my fleet. The ops folks are like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Let's go ahead and sweat that asset. It's supposed to be here for 30 years, right? Roles and responsibilities, we talked about that, but do we have a clear enough definition? Are there G's and O's tied to it? Risk awareness versus risk tolerance. So I'm going to ask y'all some triggering questions, but as anyone said, have you been asked, oh, can we delay the patching for a month? Or have you been asked, has this update been tested for my environment, right? It's triggering because we all experience those things. We all have different thresholds. And unfortunately, a lot of times the risk thresholds from corporate haven't been translated down. So we don't have a common definition of good enough. I talked about the UI UX being focused to those users and operations. We could do better because we're not going to grow more security at every site. We're not going to increase staffing. So how do we reduce the cognitive load? How do we make these tools more intuitive? Lastly, around remote access and connectivity. Most folks in operations would like everybody just out of their chili, right? They would just like to run their plant. They don't want people from the outside, but they're stuck with the data science team from the enterprise pulling in their OT data. They have service providers that are in there, and they're just kind of stuck in that situation, right? And then we're screaming about security concerns on top of it. So it's a difficult position to be in.
So moving on to Act 3. We understand the problem that we are facing, that we understand the gap we have in terms of the language we use versus in a cybersecurity team versus operational maintenance team. How can we work together with our colleagues in operations team to achieve the business goal together? So in Japan, where I grew up, it's the area that we have a lot of manufacturing company, especially the automotive industry. And I'm from academia, and in the university we teach the how we build a car basically, and when we teach about the engineering basics and the system development process, we teach about waterfall process, but also this V model. And V model is made very much in idea of similar to the atomic design methodology, which means that you define the requirements and what the system or function should be doing. And then you're breaking down from, well, what the system should look like, and then what should it do, and then what the system should look like, and what it should be doing as a requirement, and what's the functional requirement of that. And it's and then breaking down to, okay, as the component, what should it do? Then equipments, what should the equipment should be doing? And then the good benefit of this V model is to do the testing and incrementally from the equipment, components, system, and a whole function as a whole in incremental way. In this way that we try to avoid the huge feedback cycle of, oh, no, we have to redesign everything again. And this cycle, we can try to align how we engage with the operations team and maintenance team, and how we should have the security conversation together. The security also need to have the discussion of, okay, what is the largest consequence that we need to avoid? What is a mission critical system look like? What are the systems? Well, Andy Bachmann is here, and we worked together on the CIE books, and I translated the CIE book in Japanese, and we discussed about that a lot in the past years. The CCE, consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering, that's a long name. But it's a really great concept in terms of understanding, okay, let's think about cybersecurity from avoiding the worst nightmare case. Not thinking about, okay, oh, we need to do everything and try to make it in a whack-a-mole situation, but think about focusing on what is a mission critical system, what do we need to avoid? And can we try to build a security strategy around it? This V model aligns very well with that way of thinking. The good colleagues from INO, Idaho National Lab, the cyber-informed engineering team, they're working on the guidebook on what question can we ask to the colleagues in the operational engineering team throughout this V cycle. What are the questions that we can ask them to trigger their muscle memory? I have one example about a critical infrastructure to our daily life. Beers. When you're making a beers, you have to add yeast into in the fermentation process, right? And say that you own the artisan beer factory, and as a beer meister, you are very proud of the quality of the product you make, and the taste is the most important factor to make your beer unique and make your company thrive in this domain. And say that if that's the most important mission to achieve this very specific quality, there could be the ways that some bad people can compromise that, right? That the one way could be changing the dosage of yeast that's going into the fermentation process. But when we come to like, okay, let's think about security, that what can we do as a security team, that how can we support that to assure the quality? What's the natural process of where our thought goes? Well, let's do segmentation, let's do the patching, let's do the endpoint detection, let's do the network monitoring, let's do all the technology and do the defense in depth. Okay, that's one way. But what CIE, cyber-informed engineering, is trying to do, and what I'm also like very much in great fan of, is can we also solve that together with engineering team? Is there a way to achieve that defense in depth concept with engineering mindset? Is there other way to do that? What if, going back to the beer example, can we actually change the tank of the yeast tank to smaller so that it doesn't compromise the beer making process too much? And that's just the physical idea of changing the system design, right? That if we can have that conversation with the engineering and operation teams and system designers in the early phase of designing this beer production system, that could be a good way to, maybe it could be cheaper than adding the layer and layer of solutions. And then where I want to emphasize is this. What I learned so far in working in this OT security domain is I don't know everything. I can't try to understand everything. It's impossible. But there's always the people in this community, in this room, but also the colleagues that I work this inside the organization that knows better about the same system that we are trying to protect a lot. Then question is, what is the right question that I can ask to them to trigger their muscle memory? And then throughout the life cycle, there are a lot of questions we can ask, and there's also values that very much align with operations and engineer and operation and maintenance team. For example, I worked a lot with the business continuity planning and the business continuity management area. And going back to my origin from Japan, Japan is a country of earthquake, right? So every organization and every critical infrastructure has a very robust business continuity plan for the earthquake scenario. And they exercise for the whole organization at least once a year. For the extreme case of what if the earthquake happens, how can we set up the crisis management center and how we continue providing a service as a critical infrastructure? The same concept and the same muscle memory can be directly applied to cyber incident case. In the case of worst thing ever happened caused by the cyber, how can we trigger those BCP that we already have in place for plan design for earthquake drill? How can we modify that to make it applicable for cyber hazard? So that's one example from the business continuity and emergency response part. But there's also some area that we can share and achieve together to support their goal or get their insight to support security goals. For example, when we are operating, we do the asset behavior monitoring in OT security. That's quite important in terms of understanding if there's any anomaly going on. But same data could be useful to understand in operations team how the asset is being used as part of the asset performance monitoring. So there's a case of some operations team benefiting to get the idea of how the OT asset has been used so that they can relocate some assets to the different site, different business unit, so making sure that all the asset performance is being optimized. So we can have we can achieve a lot of things together by aligning the goal. Then going to the original idea of imagining the future, I want to turn to Susan again about talking about lights out factory. What exactly is that?
Yes, well, I'll hit the next slide. So you're in your fluffy cloud. We're using this Horizon 3 use case so that we can imagine different ways to support operations teams, different modalities that we could apply into a Horizon 1. So you're in your fluffy cloud, we're in Disney, we're open to it. So what the heck is a lights out factory? Well, there are no lights because there are no people. And you know, I'm not talking the Matrix. There are lots of examples of this that are really rad if you have a chance to research. So Philips in Drachten, Netherlands has taken this approach of automating everything, no people there. They make awesome shavers and toothbrushes that y'all probably use. They've had a 20% increase in efficiency, right? So there's a real business driver. Second one is Fanuc. So it's not like the Sly and the Family Stone's song, Babies Making Babies. It's robots making robots, okay? And in that, they've been able to decrease runtimes by 50%. Pan Bimbo, or the Bimbo Bakery Company, they make everything from McDonald's hamburgers to those awesome like Entenmann's snacks, right? They have been able to have equivalent to a 30% increase in capacity just from being able to optimize how they shift recipes. And probably one that's very dear to both of our hearts is Aker, a Norwegian oil and gas company that has started building in November 2023 an unmanned or unpersoned offshore platform, right? No quarters and no helicopter pad. For those of us that have gone through helicopter underwater emergency training, you're probably like, damn, I won't be able to swim in my PPE. Sorry. But that's all what's being done right now. There are hiccups, there are glitches, it's not perfect, but let's use that frame to imagine what it could be. All right, so this is your new team. right? Everybody's a robot. Everything is a sensor. It's easy because you don't have to remember birthdays, but you've got some new security challenges that are more important than they had been before. So data integrity, right? Checksums, hashing, et cetera. If you are getting more and more kind of commands or, basically set points from enterprise production systems, MES, scheduling, dispatching, et cetera, even supply chain, that data, you have to have a high level of confidence in the quality of that data. Second piece is around data leakage, right? So is the data going between the systems in a way you would have anticipated? Second is GPS. This is really, really important in this context. Are your robots, are your robotic arms moving in the way that you had anticipated, right? Are the time sinks off? Because you could really wreak a whole lot of havoc on that vector. The third is around AI, I had to say AI in robotics, right? So for your AI models, are you training it to be able to deal with adversarial attacks? Are you checking it frequently? Do you have that simulation capability? And on robotics, establishing a behavioral baseline, maybe for different recipes, different brands, even different ambient conditions, right, is really, really critical because it's operational anomaly detection because you don't have folks there, right? All right, so to quote Nas and Tupac, it's time to pour one out for those who have gone before us, right? And in this future world, the Purdue model has left us, and we are in a world of mesh microservices, right? So what would that mean? What would that look like? Well, we need documentation updated in real time. So y'all know, show of hands, everybody like walking through their plants with really old PID drawings, trying to figure out what tag number matches what? Anybody? Yep, love that. So that won't work because there's nobody there to be like, yeah, we updated the heat recovery steam generator last week, but no, it won't work. Next, we all love to talk about zero trust, but your robots are your insider threats now. So you gotta zero trust like you mean it. Data lifecycle, right? So what are the life cycles around specific data sets that you need over, short term to long term? Because GPUs are the new currency. Right? So you have to make very mindful decisions around that. And lastly, we're going to talk about the C word, cloud, right? But having an intentional decision around creating this industrial data lake that has very granular controls around both data types and specific data sets is really, really critical there. But enabling your ESG teams, your CFOs, your EHS teams, all to be able to access that data, your service partners, but only what they're allowed to see, right? And really making that distinction between control and read, and doing that in a very efficient way, understanding those use cases in a really intimate context.
So this big C word, right, that having the cloud. And I know there's a lot of ways we can approach it, and we also have a lot of opinion about it as OT security people. I also had quite a big allergy around the cloud systems. I was very much on-prem forever person, but again, security is existing in the context of business, right? And then again, we also want to answer to our colleagues in operations that the yes and, right? That the yes, let's do cloud, yes, let's do AI, and what, right? And then I'm a little bit greedy person, also I want to say yes, and what's in for me. And in terms of that, as a cybersecurity perspective, well, cloud has some risks that we also need to learn how to mitigate it, and how to prevent that to happen, how we get to notice better about the risk of the cloud implementation. But there's definitely a benefit for having the cloud system. say that they having an infrastructure as a SaaS, that's really good benefit in terms of having the redundancy and also the ability to going back to the system to the status that we want. We can on and off the system, the containerized system as we want to the status we have. And the monitoring capability will be very different, and ability to scale, it will be very different. Another thing is how we can have those data about all the behavior of the control system. Yes, control in cloud, that's a little bit scary concept, but again, there is a merit. What's in for us, what's in for me. We can have much more granular threat analysis and simulations. That capability can only exist if we have the data in the cloud system. So there's definitely the benefit to having implementing cloud for us. And that can be something that we can get as, we support the business, but what's in for security? Well, we can have that thing checked off from the list of things that we need to do.
So if we move into Horizon 1, we're getting out of our fluffy clouds, we're getting ready to depart Disney World, right? What are some of the things we can do right now, right? Or consider doing right now? One is around device management. So asset inventory, vulnerability management, key management, password rotation, backup recovery, and that base monitoring, right? We have a very unique opportunity. We're not securing legacy equipment here. We are securing greenfield, right? We can work with our OEMs and say, hey, I don't want to put a bunch of extra boxes on this. I would actually like you to build your system from a hub, from a component agent that would go into my configuration management system that would feed, the software version, the MAC IP, the device number, et cetera. We can do that. We can build that in. Y'all can decide where that's consumed. So I know it's fun to bash on OEMs, but I can tell you from the OEM side, we want your requirements. Come help us build this future in a more efficient way. We are not going to scale efficiently if we add stuff up on top at the end of the day. I'm not saying the OEM should run the show, but if we build more of this capability in, we will be able to show our leadership that we are hitting new levels of efficiency. We'll be better enabled to leverage even IT equipment, right? Even IT monitoring that our company has already invested. The second piece is traceability. I know everybody loves compliance, right? Could we automate, just like a DevSecOps pipeline, could we automate compliance, right? So it'd be evidence-based. So we could say, yep, 88% of the time, we patch our critical updates within 30 days. You're not sweating getting ready for the audit. You've got that data there, right? So I think we need to move into that direction. I think we need a whole lot of collaboration to build this in a lean way. We can really reimagine this. We are not securing legacy equipment. It's going to take some work, but I think we're going to have very significant gains in this area.
And the three pillars of cybersecurity: people, process, technology, right? That we talked about a lot of technology, how it can support the advancement, but it needs to grow together with how we grow the organization and process. And the process side, how we do security operations, that needs to be automated. And one is to be able to achieve the scalability, that how the business is growing and how digitalization is expanding at the speed that we cannot simply just catch up just by extending how we are approaching cybersecurity so far. That's one thing. And the other thing is, well, tying to regulations. Some of the regulations coming in Europe, it's setting a timeline that it's just simply impossible to make it if we cannot implement any automation. So, and automation in the process doesn't mean taking somebody's job. It means that keeping the cognitive load of those critical resources for doing some more difficult jobs that needs to be prioritized. And now they can have more time to focus on that job instead of doing the tedious task of that it can be automated. So that's one thing. The other thing is the collaboration mindset. Going back to also the discussion we had earlier about, how we can align the value with operation and maintenance team. One of the great interaction that my company had with the VP of operation type of persona is that after we explained about cybersecurity, how OT security is important, how risk is increasing, the person told us, "Sir, does it make more oil?" And that's the way of thinking, right? So we need to align, okay, how can we answer to that? How can we actually change the framing of cybersecurity and OT security so that we can say, yes, we are supporting their missions. Yes, this is how we can contribute. As a cybersecurity group, we can contribute to producing more oil or making it more reliable operation. So this is the end of the talk. Again, thank you very much for staying with us until the end of the talk. And I know this is almost the end of the summit. I really appreciate the time that we spent together. And I also want to thank my co-presenter, Susan, that it was really nice working with you on this. I want you to think about this. Now we have a lot of tasks that we need to do when we go home after learning a lot in this summit and in this SANS training course. It's overwhelming, yes, but imagine like the future that everything is going well. Then what is the thing that you did right? And imagine the alternative future where everything is going wrong. What are the things that you didn't do? What is the thing that we can do to activate this muscle memory that our stakeholder within the organization has? How can we activate that? Thank you very much for your time. That's the end of our talk.
Thank you.